Michael Levine is an icon in the public relations business. His client list reads like a who's who of the entertainment industry and includes 58 Academy Award winners, 34 Grammy Award winners, and 43 New York Times bestselling authors. For 4 decades, Michael has shaped the PR strategies for clients that have included superstars like Michael Jackson, Barbara Streisand, Prince, David Bowie, George Carlin, Joan Rivers, and Charlton Heston. Michael has not only represented leading talents, but he has also authored 19 books, including Guerrilla PR, the most widely used introduction to public relations. He has delivered lectures at prestigious institutions like Harvard, Oxford, and UCLA, demonstrating his unrivaled expertise and opinions that continue to shape public perceptions and industry standards. It's truly an honor to have him on the show today. Welcome, Michael, and thanks for joining us on Life Excellence.
Well, thank you, dear friend, and thank you for the privilege of sharing your valuable audience.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to see you. Michael, you've influenced perception of and for your clients, Hollywood's elite, your entire career. And you certainly understand how public perception works as well as anyone. Why are we so obsessed with celebrities and with fame, something one author calls America's favorite addiction?
Well, it would seem to me that going back maybe a decade or two, Americans became increasingly aware of some of the quiet desperation of their own lives, that Americans started to reflect on what their own realities were and became intrigued by transcending the quiet desperation of their own lives by immersing themselves in the world of celebrity, living their lives in a certain way through the prism of the celebrity. Now, this became even more heightened as social media became more prevalent. And so in the last 10 years, I think the whole celebrity experience has quadrupled in terms of its impact to general society.
Sure. Today, really with social media, everyone has a microphone and virtually everyone's able to publish information. So from your vantage point, Michael, how does that change your job? How has public relations changed compared to when you first started in the field before really pre-internet, right? Basically, certainly pre-social media.
Pre-internet. I had a typewriter, son. I think that, first of all, let's acknowledge that the metabolism rate of the world has unalterably changed. Things are going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster than ever before by quite a big amount. So one area of change in the public relations field is the metabolism rate of the world. There is a necessity to go faster. I've had a fondness for telling people that in the world of the media, a day is a week is a month, an hour is a day. It's all it's a race to stay with or ahead of the news curve.
And so what is the race for? Is it a race for attention? Is it a race for relevance?
Yes.
What are you racing toward for your clients?
Yeah, both relevance and attention. I was quoted, Brian, in the Wall Street Journal in August of last year as saying that in the modern world, not the world of your father or mother, but the world of today, It is impossible to be credible without being visible. That visibility and credibility have connected like an umbilical cord between a mother and a child. And so when you raise your visibility, using the umbilical cord metaphor, you raise your credibility. And so I think that's an important issue, an important change, because in 40, 50 years ago, the way you became famous is that you did something notable. You created a vaccine for polio, and the next week you were on Time or Newsweek. And today, you don't have to do much of anything to be notable. You can be Kim Kardashian or Monica Lewinsky or Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian. You don't have to do almost anything to become famous today.
Well, I
So
think
it's a very changed world.
Monica Lewinsky did something to become famous. So I would just push back on that a little bit. Kim Kardashian, you're right. She's famous for being famous. When you talk about credibility, and as you first started talking about it, I was thinking about somebody who's well educated, somebody who maybe is a college professor, is educated, is an expert in his or her field. And you're talking about that connection between visibility and credibility. And so it's almost, when you say credibility, it's in some instances perception of credibility, isn't it? So it's not actual credibility; it's perception of credibility. Or am I splitting hairs there?
Look, I think fundamentally, people in modern life have to ask themselves a question. And both statements are true, but the question becomes which is more true. So in modern life, in the world of today, which is more true? A, that perception creates reality. Or B, reality creates perception. Now, they're both true, but which is more true? And I think that there's enormous amounts of evidence to suggest that in today's modern world, the first is more true. Perception tends to create reality more than reality creates perception. And so there it is, and so it is, and so it goes. Now, that may or may not be a good thing. But the question is not whether it's a good thing. The question is whether it's true. And so it is, and so it goes.
And so, given the reality today and this ever-changing media landscape, what specific strategies can our listeners and viewers deploy to, I guess, to use your words, to create that perception or to stay relevant, to get attention, and to use that to either get attention for themselves and or their businesses?
Well, there's a whole series of answers to that question. That's a good question. The first is that I think that anyone trying to connect to relevance in the early part of the 21st century would be wise to know what's going on. In the soulful words of Marvin Gaye, what's going on? You got to know the news. You got to watch the news. You got to see what's going on. A friend of mine called me up about, I don't know, 2-3 days ago and said, Michael, did you know that O.J. Simpson had died? Now, O.J. Simpson had died 2 or 3 days earlier. This person is not connected to the news. You got to be connected to what's going on. So, in the soulful words of Marvin Gaye, what's going on? Second, I think that fish where the fish are. So if you and I decided tomorrow to go fishing, we'd have a choice, I guess. We could go to a pond in which there were a lot of fish, or we could go to a pond in which there were not many fish. Or I guess we could even go to a pond where there are no fish. We could stick your fishing pole in your bathtub if we wanted to. The problem is that I don't think we'd catch many fish in your bathtub. Now, if we were going to go fishing, I think it would probably be wise to go fishing in a pond that had a lot of fish. And so, where are there a lot of fish? Well, in the interconnection between you and trending news stories, trending information, right? And so that's, I apologize here. That's an important piece of this. Fish where the fish are. And you can't fish where the fish are if you don't know where the fish are, and that's an understanding the news, and be able to be part of a trending news cycle.
So is that the role that you play as a publicist for your client?
I do, and it's one that people think has brought me a somewhat unique perspective. If somebody listening to this show is an attorney or a real estate broker or an entrepreneur, then, and they want to be relevant, they have to maybe consider, well, how can I use my knowledge as a realtor to interface with some trending news story currently in the news about real estate, or about real estate mortgages or values or something. If, on the other hand, you're an attorney, then you have to figure out how you can use your body of knowledge as an attorney to interconnect with trending news stories having to do with the legal system in America. And there's stories, legal stories, all the time.
That makes sense. How did you get started in public relations?
Well,
I know it's been a while.
Yeah, I came to LA on September 16th, 1977, and I had barely graduated high school. I had a disability all my life called dyslexia. I also grew up in a not very good home, an alcoholic home. And so my reality, I guess the reality of my life was I didn't have very good cards growing up. And so I came out to LA to get a new canvas and a new start. I was born in New York City, born about 2.5 miles north of Ground Zero. And so off I went at age 22 to this new city to look for a new start, preferably in the entertainment industry. Now, one of my problems, I had a number of problems at the time, but one of them was that I didn't have any particular skills. I didn't even know what public relations was. And so through a friend of a friend of a friend, and this is important, Brian, because who you know and who you wants to know you is very important to how your life's going to turn out. So through a friend of a friend of a friend, I met a woman who was working in the publicity department of Paramount. And now that's very uncommon at the time because women were principally secretaries in that era. But nonetheless, she was working in the publicity department. And I have always been deeply inquisitive. I don't know why that is. It's probably a very good trait to have if you're going to succeed in life. And I asked the woman what she did for a living. I knew she worked in the publicity department, but I said, "What do you do every day?" And the woman stopped and paused, thought for what I thought to be a pretty good long time. And she said, "What do I do all day?" And I said, "Yeah, what do you do all day?" And she said, "Well, I kind of bullshit on the phone." And I said, I think I can do that. And that's how the whole damn thing started.
So what is it? There are obviously a lot of people in public relations. There are a lot of publicists. There are a lot of people playing at a very high level, which is where you are. What
There are
have you
not a
done?
lot of people playing at a high level. There's a lot of publicists, but
Oh, is that right? Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I
Like any
stand.
other industry, Brian. I mean,
Sure.
just think about that. Look, there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts, right? The problem with podcasts today is not that my gardener has a podcast. The problem with podcasts today is my gardener's juvenile delinquent son has a podcast. Everybody's got a podcast. But if we look at the data, there's probably a dozen, 2 dozen that really dominate a couple dozen that dominate.
Sure.
And, that's an interesting note for your listeners, Brian, if I might suggest. Look, this is a fun way of putting it, I think. But, it's an interesting thing, Brian. In the end, men lie and women lie. But accurate numbers never lie and always tell a story. And so that's important, isn't it, to think about? Men lie and women lie, but accurate numbers never lie and always tell a story. It's important to know what story they tell, too.
Sure. So there are, let's say, several very good publicists operating at a
Yep.
very high level,
Yes.
lots of others.
Yep.
What, Michael, have you done throughout your career that sets you apart from all the others in your profession?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. First of all, I had a fairly sober understanding of my lack of greatness in the beginning. I had a fairly sober understanding of my lack of greatness. And so I said, now look, since most people that are doing this are better than I am, my only chance to keep up, forget about Excel, I just got to keep up, is I'm going to have to work a 7-day week. See, if my other friends that are more talented than I do are, my other friends, they're more talented than I am, and they're working a 5-day week. I got to go 7 because I got a lot of ground to catch up. I did learn something, Brian. Some of this is metaphoric. I learned something interesting when I began. In my first year, I was really having a hard time keeping up. And so I made a decision, and I don't know why I did, but I did. I made a decision to go into my office, which we still had offices then. And I went into my office and I said, I'm going to come in on Saturday at 10:30 in the morning. And I am going to sit there and work till 2:30 in the afternoon. So that's a total of 4 hours. And I learned a bunch of interesting things doing it. The first thing I learned is, Brian, easy parking. Easy parking. Not many people there on Saturday. Easy parking. Second, there weren't many people around, so it was pretty quiet. And those interruptions that exist all day long, they don't exist that much on Saturday. And so what I came to find out is that the 4 hours that I devoted from 10:30 to 2:30 were in reality 4 hours, but in full productivity, they had a value of 8 hours because I wasn't being interrupted. And so those 4 hours really translated into 8. Now I'd go into work Monday morning, 9 o'clock, with my other more talented friends, and I had an 8-hour lead on them in week 1. Now they were smarter than I was, so they were able to catch me by the end of the week. But then I did something even maybe more interesting. I went back on Saturday, 10:30 to 2:30. And I did the same damn thing. Now I had 8 plus 8. That's 16 hours. Now at 16 hours, could they catch me? Well, I wasn't very good, so they could. But then I went in the next Saturday and put in another 8, and that's now 24. And about 24, they were having a tough time catching up. But I went in the next Saturday, and that was 32, and so forth. And I think you're getting a picture.
Sure.
Now, a question for you, Brian. I'm just going to ask you, and you don't know, but I'll ask you to guess, and your listeners can guess along with you. Did I keep going in on those Saturdays? Brian, what do you think?
I'm guessing that you did, Michael.
I did. I kept going in. Now your listeners know the secret. I kept going in. Now, Brian, here's a question for us and the listeners. What if one of the Saturdays was Halloween? Did I go in then? Brian?
You probably went in on Halloween.
I went in. Okay. Now, what if one of the Saturdays was my birthday? My birthday, Brian. My birthday. Did I go in?
I think you probably did.
Brian, you're good at this. See, son, you're good at this. What if one of the Saturdays was Coachella or Burning Man or Comic-Con? Did I go in?
You certainly did.
Brian, you're good at this, son. You're really good at this. So there it is. So the story was a story of drive, of will, of determination, of sober reality about my own inabilities. And, what is the old mastery begins at 10,000 hours? Now, that's a phrase that we've all heard, or many have heard. Mastery begins at about 10,000 hours. Now, if you're going to do an hour a week, 10,000 is a long time, brother. If you're going to do 10 hours a week, it's still pretty good. You're going to do 100 hours a week, now we're starting to make some progress. So there you go. Life really begins, personally and professionally, with one question that has 2 parts. So I'm going to ask the question of your audience. Obviously, I'm not going to hear their answers, but it's an internal question. It's one question with 2 parts. It's how the journey begins, both personally and professionally. Here we go. What do you most want? And what are you willing to give up to get it? And if you're not willing to take mega doses of vitamin N, which means no, you got to say 1,000 no's to get one big yes. Think about these things, friends. Think about them. You may not be pleased with me as you're hearing them. You may disagree. You may be cross with me. The question is not whether you're cross with me. The question is whether these are true or worth considering. Because the people who defy these natural laws then have to hold themselves exposed to Dr. Phil's great question. How's that working for you?
Yeah.
All right. So
that's great. That's great advice. And obviously, the willingness to do what other people in your field weren't willing to do put you ahead in your own profession.
right. And
And
by the way, Brian, it's a little bit easier for our younger friends today in certain ways. Not always. In some ways it's harder, but it's easier. Why is that? Because our 24 and 25-year-old friends have been born into a generation at exactly the moment in human history in which most of their competition is stupid and lazy. Now, by stupid, I don't mean academically stupid. I mean stupid in that they're so distracted with nonsense that they're functionally stupid. They're not paying attention. Every email they're reading, about 60% of the time on their phone, they're reading the email on their phone while they're combing their hair, drinking an energy drink, texting a friend, smoking a cigarette, listening to a podcast, and their mind has been effectively shut down. Genius or greatness is born of contemplation. And contemplation is born of time. Let's do that again, if I could, for the audience. Let's think about that. Genius or greatness is born of contemplation. Contemplation is born of time.
so say a little bit more about that, just to make sure we understand that clearly.
Yeah. Look, if you've got a speech to give, you can devote a half hour to preparing it. You could wing it. Just go out and wing it. Second, you could devote a half hour to preparing for it. Third, you could devote 2 hours to preparing for it. And then another choice is you could devote 5 hours and write it well and then rehearse it several times and so forth and so on. Now, which is more likely to give you the great result? Well, probably the one where you've invested a little more time.
Sure.
Now, middle-class Americans today or above have everything they need except time and peace of mind. That this curse, this disease, this curse of distraction is as dangerous to the mental process as crack cocaine. It is a form of crack cocaine in a way. And so there we are. Concentrated, listening, thinking, considering, preparing. We have 3 mottos at our company. We have 3 central sacred mottos. Number 1, to over-prepare. Number 2, to over-check. And number 3, to over-communicate. ... to an unreasonable degree. We don't want you communicating reasonably. We want you communicating unreasonably. Now, why is that? Because we hope to God that your dreams are unreasonably large. And if you want to achieve unreasonably large dreams, you've got to put unreasonably large effort in. See, reasonable buys reasonable. Unreasonable buys unreasonable. Pick your produce, whatever you like.
You've really provided a great prescription for success, and I encourage our listeners and viewers to go back and listen to that last segment.
Well, thank
Basically,
you, Brian. And here's what I would like to do along with you. First of all, I think you've made a great contribution to your listeners because you were wise enough and disciplined enough to say, now listen, I'd like to encourage you to go back and listen a second time. Isn't that interesting? Now, where we might differ, and where I might just accentuate your own thinking, is I might encourage you to listen a third time and write it the hell down.
Sure.
And do it. Please, please do it with your phone off, without your dog in the room, without texting. Listen, pay attention as if your life depended on it, because it does, son. It does. Concentrate. If somebody had a prescription for you or advice for you that could save your life, would you listen carefully or frivolously? Me? I'd listen carefully and I'd write it down. And then I'd take what I wrote down and I'd read it every day for about 30 days. Might put it up on my refrigerator too. Depends on how bad you want to live.
That's great advice, and I'm tempted to stick with this topic of nuggets of wisdom, because you have not only been in your business for a long time, but you've also been around lots of successful people. Are there just maybe one or two other things, maybe not even in your own life, but things that you've seen with your clients that they've done especially well, given the level of success that they've achieved, that you would add to your list?
Well, Brian, a couple of thoughts around that. First of all, let me tell you something. I'm talking to your listeners as well, and that's so important. People I may never meet and all that. Also interesting. The first thing I'd like to tell you is that of all the super successful people I've ever met in my life, and I've met many, I've given advice to 3 U.S. presidents, both political parties. I've worked with 58 Academy Award winners, 34 Grammy Award winners, 43 New York Times bestsellers. Here is some phrases never used to describe super successful people. Here are some phrases never once used to describe super successful people. Here they are. Number 1, laid back. Number 2, chilled. Number 3, relaxed. They don't spend a lot of time, in the modern vernacular, kicking it. These are people that are as focused as a bullet in flight. Listen up. Second, I want to remind you, Brian, and I think I may have told you this privately, I'm not very bright. I'm really not very bright. But I am above average at watching what bright people do. And you know, Brian, that's been damn helpful. Now, if I can share another secret with you, and maybe with your audience, as good as I am at watching what bright people do, and I am above average there, I'm even better at watching what dopey people do. And that's been even more valuable. See, if you can observe carefully what bright people do, and if you can observe even more carefully what dopey people do, and dedicate your life to doing more of what the bright people do and less of what the dopey people do, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine. You know, I spoke, I did a lecture a couple years back in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was at an entrepreneurs event. About 300, looked like 300 Shark Tank contestants in an audience. young people in their early 30s. They're young entrepreneurs that just started a business 2 or 3 years ago. And they're so anxious to hear me talk. And I give a speech. And at the end of the speech, about maybe a dozen. See, out of about 300, maybe a dozen, 15 hang around at the end. The rest go into the bathroom or go outside, drink, or whatever they're doing. And about 15 hang around by the stage. And they say, God, that was great. That was just wonderful. And I talk to them for a few minutes about what they're up to, and they tell me. And I might very well say to them, young man, young lady, you're an interesting person. You're really doing something cool and fun. You have an interesting energy to you. I'm really proud of what you're trying to do and are doing. Just started your business a couple of years ago. May I trouble you for a business card so I can stay in touch with you? Well, Brian, you're not going to believe this, but I would say 90% of the young folks, and by young I mean 30, 35 years old, say to me the following. Oh, I don't have a business card. I said, son, what are you laughing at? Well, you know how it is. I don't have a business card. I have a text. I can give me your number. Now, Brian, at this moment in time, do you want to invest some of your hard-earned money in buying stock for that kind of leadership? That's probably not a good deal. Son, why don't you have a business card? Well, you know how it is. No, I don't know how it is. Well, nobody carries them these days. Yes, son, people do carry them. They're called leaders of Fortune 500 companies. They carry them just fine. Isn't this all interesting?
That's great. Very good, Michael. As you know, our show is called Life Excellence, and I'm curious, what does excellence mean to you?
Well, look, we're all put on this earth for some reason or another, and we're not here for that long. In relative terms, sometimes it feels long, doesn't it? But, if you live to be 80, you get 25,500 days. If you live to be 90, you get 29,200 days. That's it. Game over. And I think it's very important that we try to figure out what in the God's name we're supposed to be doing down here during that relatively brief time. God gave each of us some kind, or God, universe, however you like to word it, a calling of some type or another. And I think excellence is trying to figure out what it is we're down here to do and how to do the very best. And I mean the very best we're capable of. Who we are is God's gift to us. So the universe, if you don't like the word God, we use the universe, however you like to word it. Who we are is the God or the universe's gift to us. Who we become is our gift to God or the universe. And we all have a potential to do something. Now, my something might be very different than your something. That might be very different from 200 people or 500, 1,000 people listening to the show. See, somebody might make the best Chinese chicken salad the world has ever known. And I can't make a Chinese chicken salad. But other people might be called to something else. And figuring out what you're called to do and then do it with extraordinary desire to be your best self. Not be the best in the world. Be your best Brian. All I want is Brian to be the best Brian the world has ever known. That's it. I don't want him to be the best Henry, the best Philip, the best Michael Jordan, just the best Brian. And best doesn't only mean in professional success. It means acting with impeccable integrity, keeping your word. Nobody's perfect. Nobody has to keep, when you hear impeccable integrity, you hear, well, I've got to be a saint. No, you don't. You just got to keep your damn word. If you say you're going to meet me for lunch at 12:30, it means 12:30. It doesn't mean 12:45. And if I call someone on the telephone and leave a message for them, doing your best means returning that call within 24 hours, not shooting them one by email. Do me a favor, Brian. Don't shoot me one if I call you. Just pick up the damn phone or return the call. And by the way, to our young friends, I know you have young listeners, Brian. If I could offer one little piece of advice, and it sounds kind of funny, but a lot of stuff I say may sound a little bit funny, but I'd like to actually offer two pieces of advice to anyone listening to this show who's under 35. Okay? Fun thing. I don't know who's going to be listening. I don't know how many will be under 35, but here's my two pieces of little advice for people under 35. Now, it's probably for other people older than 35, but we'll just start with them 35. Number one, my friends, my dear valued friends, my younger friends. I wish I were your age, by the way, but I'm not. But here's a thought. Friends, do yourself a favor. Please, I'm asking you. For your benefit, not mine. See, I already did pretty well. But I'm asking you for your benefit. Stop hiding on planet email. Stop it. Stop it. Stop hiding on planet email. If you want to have a coffee with somebody, a friend, there's no need to send 14 emails back and forth to arrange it. Just pick up the damn phone and say, hey, Henry, how's Tuesday? Stop hiding on planet email. Here's another crazy thought for you. This is particularly for our younger friends, 30, 35. I'd like to challenge you in the next 90 days to reduce your texting by 95%. Wow, what? I'd like to challenge you in the next 90 days to reduce your texting by 95%. Okay? Now, some of you listening to that, that's crazy. What? I've talked to young people. How many text messages do you send and receive a day? Oh, I don't know, about 200. What? What are you doing? Son, daughter, sisters, brothers, sisters, children of the night. What the hell are you doing? You want me to read them for you? I'll look at them. Let me tell you how many of them are valuable. How many are going to bring you what you want in the future? And by the way, an emoji is not come on. Friends, when somebody, first of all, if you got friends that are texting you messages of that grave importance, you got the wrong friends. See, if somebody in their life dies and they inform you by text, wrong friend. See, that's the wrong friend. And that's another good thought for our younger friends. Here's a piece of homework for you. Ready? Fire your flaky friends. Just fire them. They're gone. Anyway, those are a couple wacky little thoughts for you to think about. And Brian, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but one of the things I'm starting to do, on the 17th of April, I turned 70. And I've decided that in addition to our very, very active PR branding firm, I'm going to do some consulting with people, businesses, and some personal coaching for people that may desire the help or need the help. Because the only way I can keep anything I've got is if I'm willing to give some of it away. And that's a strange, paradoxical law of the universe. You can't keep it unless you're willing to give it away. I know you believe some of that because I know you do some of that. And in fact, maybe this podcast is some of that. Isn't that interesting? Maybe this podcast is some of that. So there you go.
Well, it definitely is. And Michael, I am so appreciative of you being on the show and sharing your insight and wisdom. And I will say that your delivery was a bit unorthodox, but I hope especially for the young folks that they don't dismiss your delivery and that they take time to listen to the message. Because one of the things that I talk about a lot, one of the things I tell our kids, and we have 4 children, is if you can't think of a strategy, just do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. And that's a pretty good start. And so a lot of the things that you were talking about would be, if they heed your advice, if our listeners and viewers, if I heed your advice, we'd be doing the opposite of what most people in society are doing. And that's a pretty good start on our way to success.
Okay.
Michael, thanks again for your time.
Again.
I appreciate you, my friend. It's been great.
All right. You're my friend, and thank you for sharing your valuable audience. And listen, to your valuable listeners, I care about you even though I haven't met you. I want to see you do some good things. You're capable of it. Now, that doesn't mean everyone's going to be Michael Jordan or whatever, but you're capable of doing some good things. And let's get it going. Let's get it going because time is short. All right. It's an honor to talk to you, Brian. Bye.
Likewise, Michael. Thanks.
God bless.
And to our listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning into Life Excellence. Please support the show by subscribing, sharing it with others, posting about today's show with Michael Levine on social media, and leaving a rating and review. You can also learn more about me at brianbartes.com. Until next time, dream big dreams and make each day your masterpiece.